This is a special 6-month inquiry commissioned by the House itself to look at what has been the legacy of the London Olympic and Paralympic Games. So we had quite a short time scale in which to operate, but I think the important thing is that we wanted to look not at the Games themselves, which were obviously a tremendous success, but at whether we've got in place the mechanisms to carry forward the very high aspirations that there were about legacy. Now, obviously, we're also quite clear that conducting this inquiry only a year after the Games themselves finished would mean that a lot of the longer-term legacy implications, particularly on the regeneration of East London, will still have a long way to go. So we're concerned to see whether or not the arrangements have been put in place to ensure that that legacy is delivered in the next 5, 10, 20 years. The enormous success of the Games themselves came about because there was a brilliant degree of coordination, there was clear leadership, and there was obviously a very clear deadline. The Games had to be ready, had to take place on a specific date and run forward for the weeks that followed. Our concern is that if we look ahead to the legacy, which inevitably is something that in some instances may take 10, 20, 30 years to fulfill, that there isn't the same sort of spirit of coordination, the same sort of spirit of legacy. So we're saying that as far as government is concerned, a single senior minister should be designated to lead on the question of legacy, to make sure that all the people are brought together, all the different organisations, that heads are banged together, and that the process is carried forward effectively. We're also clear that as far as London is concerned, the office of the mayor should take on a lead responsibility for having the vision for the future of East London and to make sure that all the changes we want to see happen in East London actually take place. We've looked at a whole number of areas. We've looked at whether or not the sporting aspirations have been achieved. There was this hope that there was going to be a step change in sporting participation. Now, as far as we can see from the evidence, that step change hasn't taken place. But it's critically important for us as a nation that we tackle the obesity epidemic, that we make sure that more and more of our citizens take an active interest in sports, to have a much healthier, active lifestyle. And so we've looked very closely at what has been done to reinforce the teaching of sport, the encouragement of physical activity for school-aged children and beyond, whether the arrangements are in place to make sure that that's delivered effectively, but also that the facilities that exist in the community for people to participate in sport are of the quality that we would expect. Many other cities who've hosted the Olympics, we've seen that stadia have been left empty and to rot, that all the brilliant facilities built for the Games themselves have not been used properly in the future. We looked very hard for white elephants, and I have to say we didn't find any. Arrangements have been put in place for the future use of all of the major permanent sites, and there will be a significant programme of community activity possible within them. We were slightly disappointed about the rather playground behaviour of some of the football clubs around the future use of the Olympic Stadium. We're concerned that this huge national asset should be used for the benefit of the community. We're pleased that it's going to be used by a major football club. What we want to make sure is that there is enough other community-based activity centred on the stadium itself. We felt it was particularly important that we didn't just listen to all the organisations who've got responsibility in this area, but that we go and listen to the people of East London themselves. So the committee itself went round East London, talked to people, and we heard from a large number of individuals. And I think what was striking was that quite a number of them didn't feel that they had seen the benefits for them and their families that they had hoped to from the Olympic Games. And one of the lessons for us is that it's going to be crucially important for the London Legacy Development Corporation, and indeed for the various boroughs concerned, to make sure that the opportunities for new jobs and so on that are being created are notified to local people, that people are aware of what exists, but above all, that the opportunities are given to them to acquire the skills necessary for employment in the future. The government is obliged to respond to the various recommendations we've made within about 2 months. After that 2 months period, the House itself will debate the report and the government's response. And we're also saying that because so many of our recommendations stretch forward way into the future, that the House should look at ways in which it can revisit the recommendations and see what's being done in a year's time, and see whether or not the various agencies that have made promises have fulfilled the promises that they've made.